Hi, this is Em, and today I'm going to talk about alum in more detail. I've actually been asked a couple of times by people, how do you alum paper? And while I have talked about alum in other videos, I really haven't done a detailed process of what I do and why I do it. So if this sounds like something that you are interested in, then please stay tuned. First, let's talk about alum. I have granulated alum, and I've got it from two different vendors. This one here is from Jacquard, and they package their alum more for the craft market, and it's aluminum sulfate. And it says alum is used to pre-treat fabric or paper before marbling to ensure that designs transfer clearly. It's also used as a mordant with some natural dyes. And that's what we're using it for our eco paper, is as a mordant, which helps to draw out the color from your botanicals and embed them in the paper that has been penetrated with the alum. And you can read for yourself, but I'll go ahead and read it real quickly. Fabric, dissolve 1/4 cup alum in 1 gallon of warm water. I tend to have my own amount, which you'll see when I do the demonstration part of the video, and it says for paper marbling, dissolve 1/4 cup of alum in 1 quart of water. So you can read those directions and use them as stated or adjust them to suit your needs and your paper that you're using. The other kind of alum that I have is this one, which is more of a food, it's marketed for food grade, and it's also aluminum sulfate, but it says it's kosher and it is packaged for traditionally called for in old pickle recipes. And so if you go to the supermarket, you can find those little tiny jars of alum, but they cost a fortune, whereas you can buy this whole big bag. What is this? This is 3.5 pounds. I can't remember what I paid for it, but I probably only paid maybe $15, $20. I know that this other one that I just showed you is 1 pound, and I think I paid something like $12 for it. Now, granted, that was before shipping, but still, if you go to the supermarket, you're going to pay a whole lot more for those tiny little containers. Another question that I get asked a lot is, what kind of paper do you use or should you use? And really, I would just suggest that if you're new to this, that you try anything at least once and see how it works for you. A paper that looks like it's going to hold up under rinsing certainly would be better. A multi-purpose paper or a watercolor paper or something like that. That is if you rinse your eco prints when they're done. I always do rinse the debris off under very gentle water in the sink to clean it off. And so yes, I do like things that hold up. Sometimes I'll get a little rip, or sometimes if something's folded in half, it'll totally split. But you just experiment and find what works for you. I'll show you what paper I used for these samples that I pulled in just a second as I talk about paper. And going into more detail about paper, I alum all kinds of paper, including rice paper, which I'm not going to show you right now, and colored paper, because I use those for marbling. I don't use those for eco printing. For eco printing, I'll just show you some of my most popular ones. This is actually from a sketch pad. This was from a 18 by 24 inch sketch pad. I cut it in half, so it's now 12 by 18. And it's a Grumbacher sketch pad, only it didn't have, I couldn't find the paperweight on the cover, so I don't know what it is, but I will move this to the side so that you can see. I'll move all these to the side so you can see under and kind of get an idea of how thick the paper might be based on the see-through, how see-through it is. And the reason why I've got the ruler and that piece of eco print paper down there is because otherwise the camera doesn't want to focus with all this white. So I have this particular paper I haven't tried before. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a try, and I thought I'd get it alumed. And so this is just like I said, sketch paper. Don't know the weight. Certainly a lot thicker than any kind of copy paper, and will Something else I'm going to alum are these ivory note cards, and they already have a score line down the middle. And then I'm going to also try the envelopes, and then I've got a smaller size. And these are cardstock grade. I don't know what weight, but you can see you can't really see through it. It's pretty thick. It's a lot thicker than the sketchpad paper that I just showed you. And I haven't tried these before either, so this will be an experiment. But I'm going to go ahead and alum those. This paper is just a, I have it for flower presses that I sell. I don't think I have very many of those flower presses left, but this is refill packs of 7 by 9 inch blotter paper. That's all it says about it. It didn't tell what kind of paper, the weight, or anything. And I have used it before. This was done with this paper. So it gives good results. It's a little thinner than it's thicker than copy paper, but you can see you can see through to the ridge of where the paper is below it. But it does make it through the rinse cycle, and it does work. There's the back side, and then there's the other side. This is a lupin leaf. So that was done with this paper. Another paper that I really like a lot and that I use and is very affordably priced is this particular paper. It comes 9 by 12 and it's called PACON, multi-purpose paper. And again, this is another one, excuse me, where I couldn't find the weight of the paper. So I'll just take a look. I'll off-slide it so you can get an idea of how see-through it is. And it holds up real well, and that's what was used for this. This is red lettuce, and then this was, I'm not sure, but I'm thinking from walking out in the garden now is that might have been foxglove. Now, I'm not sure, but, and then on the other side I had these ferns. So that was done with this, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, I'm going to say Pacon or Paxon paper. Anyway, PACON is the name of that if you want to look that up. Multi-purpose paper is how it's marketed. This is a watercolor paper. This is Fabriano, and it is a cold press watercolor paper. And it comes in a 12 by 18 inch sheet. And either I've sold all of the eco prints that I did with this paper because I don't have anything to show you what I did on it left. But it works. Let's pull this over to the side so you can see. You can't really see through it too much. You can see through it a little bit, but not as much as some of the other papers that we just looked at. This is Canson watercolor paper. It's 140 pound, 300 G. It comes in a pad that's 11 by 15. Move that over to the side. And you can see at 140 pounds, you can't even see through it. It's very thick. Holds up well. And then the last one that I'm going to be aluming in the session that I'm going to be working on is this paper. This is, again, a Canson. It's a cold press. The other Canson I just showed you is also cold pressed. I'm not sure if this is any different than the other, except for maybe the size that I purchased, because this came as an 18 by 24 inch collection, and then I cut it in half to 12 by 18. And the reason why I cut them in half is because I really don't have any pots or pans or heat presses or anything that can do something larger right now than really a 12 by 15 is ideal, but I want to try to do some 12 by 18s also. So that's about as large as I'm going at this moment in time. So again, just get out whatever paper you have and play around and see what works for you. But those are the ones that are on my list of things to alum this time around. When I do a bulk alum session, which I'm going to be demonstrating in just a little bit, I will first take these cardboard boxes and or these sheets of brown paper that I got in shipment boxes as packing material, so I should say I'm recycling it. And I've got this whole stack here of paper and boxes. And this is how they live when they're not in use. It is in this bundle. And then I keep this bundle. Basically what I do is I will dip the paper in the pan that I'm going to demonstrate quickly here, and then I will hold them up and let them drip a little bit, and then I will take them over and I'll set them on these papers. And as you can see, for example, on this guy, and these boxes open out because I've cut them open. And you can see these are well used. And this whitish color, that's the salt residue from the paper. So as the wet paper dries, and of course being against this, this cardboard and or these papers, some of the salt leaches onto these as part of the process. I just reuse them over and over, and when they get too grunged out, then I'll get fresh boxes or fresh material. But I always have these at the ready. I just, like I say, I fold them up and I put them on a top shelf in my basement, and that's what they do. So I'm going to go set these out. Where do I set them out? I set them out on the floor. And I'll usually do this when my husband's not home or there's no one going to be coming to visit, because you really can't walk around the floor once I do that, because the area that I use up is a pretty big space, and there's just enough for me to walk through and lay the papers down while they dry. And it usually takes, gosh, several hours for them to be dry enough for me to pick up and kind of put in a little stack and then finish drying overnight. But this is how I do that. I don't use towels and that kind of thing, because I really don't want all that salt getting in my towels. I just don't have that many towels around that I want to ruin, so I'll just go ahead and recycle and use these papers. I want to make a comment on newsprint. The reason why I use brown paper or this white paper that doesn't have any writing on it is because the newsprint will come off on your paper. If you want to imprint some of this type of newsprint stuff and dirty up your paper because it's a look you're going for, by all means give it a try and use it. But that's not the look I'm generally going for. I want my paper to start out just being alumed, because I don't know what I'm going to put on it for botanicals or that kind of thing. So I will shy away from using actual printed newsprint as something to put the papers down on. But certainly give it, if that's something you want to try, certainly do that, because that's always an option for you. There's three main methods that I use to alum, depending upon, do I have any papers already pre-alumed ready to use, or do I need to do something really quickly in a rush? And we'll start with the in a rush first. And you've probably seen in my other videos that I have a container that I keep with alum water. And then I also have a spray bottle. Now usually the spray bottle I use to spray on paper as I'm actually doing the eco-dyeing process, whether it's spraying the papers as I'm putting the flowers down and sandwiching and making stacks to put in the oven or some other cooking method, or using the heat press, is generally how I will use the spray alum. This I will use if I just need a piece of paper in a pinch and I don't have any available, and all I do there is I'll just take and grab a sponge. This isn't my favorite sponge, but I don't know where my other one went. Stick the sponge in, get it damp, actually pretty wet, I'm not even going to wring it out. And then I'm just going to get the paper. I want the paper to get very wet and saturated. And I want to do it on both sides. And I mean, it doesn't even hurt to get it wet. I'm not talking damp here, I'm talking wet. And I'm going to let it soak in for just a minute. Let me say a word about safety first. Alum is a salt, and people use it for cooking, as I showed you in the food grade alum. I'm not worried about alum affecting my health for the limited amount of time that I use it, or what I'm doing here with my hands. I'm not wearing gloves. When I'm done, I'll run up and wash my hands and put lotion on, because the biggest thing that I notice that alum will do is it just dries out. It dries out the skin. But people even use alum as, you've heard me say this in other videos, I have a men's wet shaving website, and I sell alum for use after men shave as an antiseptic for their face. Now, granted, you moisten the alum block and you rub it on your face, and then you wash it off. You don't leave it on, again, because of the drying factor, but it is reputed to be an astringent and an antiseptic. So if you're concerned about your hands drying out or anything like that, then wear gloves. But I'm not, and so I'm not going to wear gloves. Now, I probably used a little too much water, because you don't need a puddle that big, and you didn't need to leave it in the water that much. I'm just going to let a little bit drip off. And now I'm going to set it over on my paper that I showed you to dry, or to get drier and be damp. If I wanted to do a eco-dyeing session right away, I'd go ahead and probably let this dry for 10 or 15 minutes so it isn't quite as wet, and then I'd go ahead and start the session for eco-dyeing. But that's what I do if I need it in a pinch. However, for mass production, so to speak, I will use a pan, and I will run them through a pan, and I'll show you that technique next. All I'm doing here is just lobbing up the extra water. This table right here has got a vinyl coating on it, so I'm not worried about water on there. And I may even just be able to take this sheet and just pour this back in. I mean, there's nothing dirty right now about this water, so I'm not worried about it. And then I'll put the lid back on, and it'll be ready for another session. This is my grungy pan that I use to do my alum and other crafts. And you can see it's about, well, it's almost the size of this paper, which would be 12 by 18. So the pan's just a little, it's at least 12 inches wide, but not quite 18 inches long. But I'll show you in a minute how I feed the paper through. And it's about that deep. I have put this water in the microwave. There's not very much, probably about this much of the glass. You want the water hot when you add the alum to help dissolve it. And I'm going to use this alum. I know that this glass up to about here, to about a ½ inch from the rim, is 2 cups of water. And so if I'm just going to use one of these filled, I'll use 1 heaping teaspoon of alum. And I'll stir it around. And you want to stir it around until you see it all dissolved. And it'll kind of go from being this kind of cloudy color to getting a little bit more clear. Now this glass is pretty hot right now because I had it in the microwave, so I'm going to wait a minute before I add some cold water or room temperature water to it, because I don't want to crack the glass. If you're not using a glass, which is what this is, and you're not worried about cracking your glass, then don't worry about it. I don't know why. This is just the glass I usually pull to use, and but you can see how the water's getting clearer now. I'm downstairs, so I don't have a sink near me, so this is just tap water that I've got in a gallon jug, and it's room temperature. I'm just going to add a little bit, again, because I don't want to crack the glass, although it's not as hot as it was. So now that's ready. I'm just going to pour this in my pan. Now, when off camera, I've got a whole bunch of papers that I want to do, and I'll add more to this, but just for demonstration purposes, that's all I'm going to add right now. Put the cover back on the alum. This back on the head. I have my papers, my cardboard already strewn around, like I showed you a minute ago, how I use that. And I'm going to take this piece of watercolor paper, which is the largest size that I've got, and all I do is I put it in at an angle, and then I just make sure that it's fully saturated with water, which is why a little bit more water in here would be nice. That way I don't have to finagle it around. But I want both sides to get saturated. I will leave it for a minute to kind of draw it in. And that's it. And when I pull it out, I let it drip for a minute, a little bit, not a whole, not a literal minute. And then I will set it on my paper. Let's do a couple of these cards. Now, sometimes when this pan's got more water in it, when I've got a higher depth, I'll put a pile of papers in at once so they can all start to soak, and then I'll work each the top sheet. I'll work it and then I'll pull it out. So you can put more than one sheet in at a time. You don't have to just do it singularly. You can put a bunch in as long as you're not worried about the paper falling apart while you're doing it. So, what I mean by that is, let me get a couple of those PACON packing papers. And then I'll do the rest off camera. Okay, so these are, the longer the more patience you have and the longer you leave them in there to get thoroughly saturated, the better, because the more alum that's embedded in there, the better for your prints. Okay, so I'll set this down. If it wasn't on video, I would let these soak longer, but for the sake of speed. And what I mean about soaking more papers at once is here I've got 4 papers, and I'm just going to put them all in at the same time. And just let them start soaking. The longer you can leave the paper in to let it absorb the alum water, the better off you are. So these have been in here for a couple of minutes. And I'm going to start pulling them out. And as I pull them out, I'll just make sure that each piece that I'm pulling out is fully saturated. Let it drip for just a minute, like the other ones. And set them aside on the paper that I have on the floor. So that's it. That's all I do for aluming paper. And once all these papers that I showed you are alumed and dried, I just set them in a pile and store them until I need them, and then I just grab them and do the eco printing. So thank you for tuning in, and you will have a wonderful day.